Welcome to our third edition of Standpipe Operations Challenges, and we're going to discuss the things that should be changed, and those things that, in our opinion anyway, are attitude and training. And so once we change those, then we can get into the number one, equipment and staffing, how to work with staff, short staff. Anyway, I'm going to throw it to, I'm Mike Langford, 29 years with Toronto Fire. I'm also the president of Hogtown Pools and an instructor with Firestar Services. I'm going to throw it over to Mark Vanderfeist now.
Everybody, good evening. Welcome to our third edition here of our podcast, our video Zoom meeting here. And as Mike mentioned, we're looking at our third series of what we need to change. We looked at the first time around things we can't change, like staffing. Second round, we looked at things that we are able to change, like our equipment and the different packages needed for our high-rise equipment. And so for tonight, we're going to look at the third installment of what we have to change. And we're going to focus on two prevalent points, which will be our attitudes and the training towards high-rise / standpipe operations, because the two are do dovetail together in terms of each other. And you'll hopefully tonight we'll see how, or explore rather, ways that we can direct or change the attitudes of people towards the high-rise training aspect of it, and how we can also through training have that back up the previous 2 points of things that we can change and things that we can't change. So welcome to our third edition tonight, and hopefully it goes well for you. As I am Mark Vanderfeist, and I am the president of Firestar Services, and I'll pass it off now at this point to Matt Worley to introduce himself.
Guys, thanks for having me again. Mikey, you may still be having me on. There we go. Thanks for having me again tonight, guys. My name is Matt Worley. 20 years in the fire service, volunteer side, career side. I'm honored to be here as a member of Hogtown Pools and also as an instructor with Firestar Services. So I'm glad that we're going to start to talk about some things that we can change, some attitudes, some training stuff that we can change. So thanks for having me, guys.
Mark Schmitt.
Hey guys, yeah, Mark Schmitt again. I've got 27-ish years in the fire service, 11 years in a career fire department. It's not quite as big as Toronto, but it's pretty close. Can't use the name because they kind of get a little bit fussy about that, but yeah, I'm happy to be here. My volunteer fire department, we're kind of working through some high-rise stuff right now, so it's a good time to be part of this group. I'm an instructor for Firestar, and I taught at the high-rise conference last year, and looking forward to the third and final night.
Good, thank you. Brent Brooks.
Brent Brooks, 27 years firefighter. I work on the dedicated high-rise unit in the big city, and glad to be here. You had me at high-rise, and you had me at attitude and training. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob Wiggins.
Hi, Rob Wiggins, 13 years in the fire service. Thanks for having me back, Mike and Mark. Super happy to be here. Hogtown Pools member and instructor for Firestar Services.
Thank you. And then Matt Baca, please.
Hi, I'm back here. Thanks for having me again. 10 plus years in the fire service in a medium-sized department in the East GTA. Instructor with Firestar Services, a member of Hogtown Pools, and happy to be here again.
Good. All right, we'll go right back to Mark, and we'll start talking about how we're going to direct this.
Okay, so let's dive into the attitude. That seems to be the most prevalent foundation for all of this in our night tonight. And we want to explore hopefully the aspects of what good attitudes and bad ones lend into the whole high-rise training aspect. And we can go all night talking about attitudes in general as far as training goes, but we want to focus on really the high-rise and / the standpipe operations aspect of it. So what do we find is the biggest attitude that we're going to face when it comes to high-rise or any kind of standpipe operations when it comes time to implementing changes or new equipment or new tactics and new operations? And a lot of times, I think we're going to find the biggest adjustment factor is we're changing. And hopefully the change that's being driven is for the best, going for the better, as opposed to regression. And a lot of times when we are progressing forward with the change for the better, we are going to have a lot of naysayers and a lot of traditionalists who want to hold on to the old and not look to the new. And when we keep holding on to the old ways, the old ways of doing things, even though it may have worked so far for that department for the last 10, 15, 20 years, there is going to be that day coming when the old ways are not going to work and we're going to get caught off guard. And when that event happens, that's when we need to be prepared and ready for it. So the new way of doing any kind of high-rise or standpipe operations is going to hopefully prepare that department, that member, that crew, so when that event does occur, they're ready, not just with mental preparation, but with equipment, with the skill set, the muscle memory, the tactical athleticism, the effectiveness and the efficiency of what they need to do to adapt and overcome and take care of the problem should it or when it actually does come time. So we have to address the issue of the traditionalists always holding on to the old and not wanting to embrace the new. So let's dive off that platform tonight and let's see what we have as far as our panelists go in terms of where do we sit with that and how can we kind of explore, open up this aspect of the attitude portion.
All right, we'll go to Matt Baca.
How are you here? Attitude. Well, you find in a medium-sized department, the biggest thing we get when making change and implementing things is using non-comparables. So unfortunately, when we start looking at high-rise stuff, a lot of OGs from the old are always pulled from, we'll call the big guns, the big cities that have resources to do things, but don't quite work for us. It was actually brought up too in a discussion once by the guy, Andrew Broussard. He made a good point. He's like, why are you trying to compare things that aren't comparable to you? Look at the same size department or less. I think that's the most valuable place to start your change is find someone with similar size, find someone smaller. How are they doing the same job with less resources? But how can you improve yourselves as well by taking stuff the big guys are doing and putting it to use where you are as well?
Very good. Thank you, Matt. We'll go on to Matt Worley.
I really like Mark's points there about guys that want to stick with the way it's always been. One of the biggest things we find, and I think, Schmitt, I think you can chime in fairly well on this, high-rise conference last year. So we did some great hands-on training with 1 3/4 hose. Then you flip that over to 2.5-inch hose, 65 millimeter hose. And it was remarkable the number of people that said, that's a lot easier than I ever thought it would be, moving a 2.5-inch hose. And it's getting that mindset, that getting out of their heads that, you know, the 2.5 is so hard to move and it takes 3 guys and it takes all this. And we're just so stuck in our ways about the way it was and the way we always used to do it. Mark had a great point that, you know, it worked for us in the past. Does it mean it's going to work for us tomorrow? Not necessarily. So we always need to look at changing. And unfortunately, the fire service, by and large, we're not there to always look at that change for the positive.
Very good. We'll go to Rob Wiggins.
Yeah, all great points. I totally agree with Baca's on the medium-sized department and finding it comparable. I think just to not repeat anybody else's points, but just to add, I think we're setting ourselves up for failure before we start. And in the pre-service and other departments, I think using the 65 as a punishment, as a exertion tool to show how hard something can be, and showing that ripping pressure across a parking lot or sitting on a big loop and making it a stationary fixed nozzle, That's the mindset that everyone has. And again, we're setting ourselves up by using it as that punishment in those type of training events.
Good. Thanks, Rob. We'll go to Mark Schmitt.
Yeah, some really good points there brought up by a bunch of guys, and to Matt's point, yeah, I had a bunch of guys that kind of played around with the 1 3/4. They that's what they use, 45 mil back home, and we got them moving 45 or 65 in some tight spaces, and they were really surprised at how easy, with a small complement, you know, of 3 or 4 or 5 guys, that they could move some large diameter hose in a narrow space. But we were pumping the right pressure through a smoothbore nozzle. It wasn't to the point about let's use that fog nozzle on a 65 and really scare these kids as recruits, and that lasts forever. And I think there's a bit of a training attitude at one point, particularly in the department I'm in, that the training experience had to be a difficult, humiliating thing, and it really created a culture of not wanting to go to training, to the point of getting out of training any way possible. So kind of, I think, you know, we're kind of talking about the way guys want it, and that's the old saying, is that we complain about two things: the way it is and the way we want to go. Like, it, no matter what we complain about things, it's just, we have to open up the eyes. We have to talk about those comparables. I know that I tried to use some comparables, and unfortunately, because of the size of us, it was hard to find a comparable that was really Canadian based per se. It was easy to find US based ones. Well, then I got pushed back because it was US based information as opposed to Canadian based stuff. So when you're talking about those comparables, make sure they're comparable in many ways, that not only are they from the same country, the same province, but a similar size or exact size, close size as you can get, and truly look at what they're using equipment wise. And then do some of your research, right? Dig into the NFPA stuff, the NIST studies, and create a business case. I think Brent can probably talk to it for Toronto. He created a great business case for you guys, and it's working. So that's kind of my point, is it's hard to convince the guys in the station. I had a captain say to me, why do we got to go to bigger diameter hose? Why do we have to go to a gate valve with a pressure gauge on it so we can pump the line that we want on the fire floor? And I had to ask him some questions like, did you ever have the hose that was really stiff, or it was over pumped, it was hard to handle? Well, yeah. Well, those are the reasons why, is because you weren't controlling the pressure in those lines. You know, I think that's kind of what we're all running into, not just the panelists here, but the viewers that are listening tonight. That's what we all run into all the time, is those bad experiences in training, sticking with the old ways. It's familiar to me. It's easy. I don't have to train more to learn the new way. That's kind of the things that I run into most frequently.
Very good. Thanks, Mark. We'll go on to Brent now.
What I'm going to say is what I find affects attitude is complacency. Because we're from a big department, we run multiple calls to the same building time and time again. And at that time, we're bringing a smaller diameter hose line. We just became complacent of doing the same thing, you know, over and over and over again. And now when we ask our members, hey, guess what? We're going to bump up a couple hose sizes to a 65. Now that's shocking, because you're running the same calls. You get in this rut. You're carrying a lighter weapon. Now we want you to run the same calls and jump up a couple nozzle sizes. That was really hard for us to convince. So we had to take science. We had to take what other departments are doing within Canada and a couple places in Europe, and show the science on the hose and nozzle package that works with the buildings within Ontario and works in for the city of Toronto. So it's been good, but yeah, complacency kills attitude. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. All right. So I got my little thing to say too, is the other day when we were doing equipment, one attitude thing that the 45 is easier to stretch. It's not any easier to stretch dry as well as the 65. We stretch both in the stairwell and come to the doorway. So, you know, one or the other. The biggest attitude change that we have to get is we're not moving that whole piece of hydraulic length, which everybody kind of thinks is 100 feet of hose. That's 250 pounds of hose, all right? So we're not doing that. It's that last 35 30 feet in that high-rise structure, and we're not charging it until we're ready to get it in place. And that's the thing. We'll talk about that in training. But anyway, that's the one attitude thing that I'm talking about. We'll move on to.
Let's hold on there, Mike. So attitude. I think what we have to paint a picture is this. In the fire service, most of our fires are fought in residential structures. So the mindset that we have individually and as a department is we are going to fight a residential fire, and we adapt or adopt that same mentality to a high-rise or standpipe facility. And that's the wrong attitude. And so right away, right from the very start, people are associating, well, a simple 1-story, 2-story house fire, which is always going to be usually your pre-connected hose lines being pulled off, 1 3/4 hand lines being used. It's not going to be a big deal. We can get out probably in 10, 15 minutes, and that's it, done, clean things up and go back home. But in a standpipe building or a high-rise situation, it's not a residential fire. It is to a certain degree, but it's elevated X number of stories above the ground. And the dynamics that the building presents makes that residential fire a whole different ballgame to play than a 1 or 2-story bedroom home singled out by itself on a piece of land. And so depending upon what municipality you're working in, whether it's downtown Toronto where you have 40, 50-story condo buildings elevated that high off the ground, or small little place near London where you have maybe 10 stories or 13 stories as your maximum height for most of your higher-rise buildings, that residential unit, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, is now elevated that much higher off the ground. We have to fight that residential fire elevated and in, as opposed to just right there on the street where we pull up, we go off, we walk 20, 25 feet, 35 feet, and boom, we're in the front door, and in we go and take care of the job. In a standpipe building, which could be a big box store or an industrial complex, again, it's a different dynamic than a residential fire. Even for the high-rise stuff, we're talking about residential units. Well, if it's an office building, multi-use building, depending upon where the fire might be, it could be an office, it could be a business, it could be, so again, those dynamics lend into the differences that make it set apart from a single-story isolated residential structure fire on the street, as opposed to a residential unit or a dental office or lawyer's office or industrial complex that's elevated or deep into a building. We got to bring all the equipment, all the manpower, all the water up or in quite a greater distance than, say, a residential building. And so the attitude that we have as a fire service has to be changed to look at that as it's different. And because it is different, you have to adjust the ball game or the tactics differently to address what that situation presents to us.
Okay, very good. You made some good points there, and I just want to touch on a couple of attitude changes. Number one is that we've always thought of the residential high-rise fire as being a, you guys can all hear me? All right. It's compartmentalized, and the old 1 3/4 or even 1.5 that we used to use, or 38 and 45, was enough to go and fight that. Well, now our residential structures, or high-rise residential, are becoming the square footage of some commercial buildings and multi-level, and the building products that we're using now aren't as substantial as they used to be. There's not block separating the rooms anymore, or at least plaster, and it's a lot more involved. And then we have to deal with the contents is different. So these are the attitudes that I keep on getting. Well, we used to be able to use 1.5 inches and be able to throw that in there and put it out right away because it's compartmentalized. So that's the one attitude. The other one is, as you said, and we talked about it a bit with equipment, the standpipe. All right. When we put the, as you were mentioning earlier, Mark, Schmitt, why do we put that valve on there when there's already a valve there on the riser? Well, that way we have more control of it, and we can actually have another pump operator at that location and giving us what we need for that pressure, and we're not over pressurizing and stuff like that. So those are a couple of attitudes we have to change, right? That why do we need these pieces of equipment, and why are we changing? So Mark, Schmitt, you want to talk on that?
Yeah, I think just to try and change that attitude or change the training or the enjoyability of the training is explaining those things, right? So why is that gauge valve there? Why are we using a pressure gauge? Why do we like the smoothbore nozzle? Well, it's because there's less nozzle reaction. It'll pass more debris. It's a little friendlier to us when it's combined with a hose packaged together that work well together. It's an easy line to take care of. It's not that fog nozzle that we experienced at the training center 10 or 15 years ago. It's a different animal, and it's really just showing people ways to adjust our positions on that hand line so that we can move it, and putting people in the right positions so that we can move it to make it easier. But the biggest thing is just explain, give them the why, demonstrate for them and give them the why. Don't expect people to do something you're not going to show them yourself, and explain why we're doing it. Give a good explanation for everything, and don't lie. That's the biggest thing, is just be honest with the students about stuff. When we switched from the fog nozzle to the smoothbore, we didn't really gain that much flow, but what we did gain is a lower pump pressure and less nozzle reaction. And it was still difficult to change that mindset of some of our guys that have been on the job for a while. And at the end of the day, we just said, hey, you're the captain. It's your call. If you want to still use the fog nozzle or you want to use the small line, by all means, go ahead. We've given you all the information to be safer. It's up to you to use it. And, your crew's going to follow you whichever way you do. So it is changing that attitude that we've been talking about. And sometimes it takes a chat from somebody with maybe a few more stripes than that fire instructor that had them at the training center to kind of adjust their attitudes to things. But it's kind of, those are the things when I look at training and attitudes, is just trying to explain the why. Why are we doing that, right? Give some history on the background if you know the history. We talked a little bit before we started taping. Big Mac, he was helping out last year at the high-rise conference. He's big on the whys, and he's big on the history of things. So know your history. Be smarter than the students so that you can give them the answers to the questions they're looking for. That's my point on it anyway.
Thank you. Rob Wiggins.
Yep. I think with the two programs that we've had success with, I think going back to basics is sometimes required. We put together a standpipe refresher. It was not pre-service level standpipe operations by any means, but it dispelled a ton of misinformation. And even what's floating around there right now, there's a lot of not valid information in regard to standpipes. And we touched on it on the last episode, just on even pumping into the building and the misconceptions with that. So when we showed what the three classes were and how they actually operated, it showed the limitations of our current equipment. That's the majority in Ontario. And that was kind of the eye-opening. And it's like, well, if this is the way the system's designed to be operated, why aren't we using that equipment? And that kind of led to the talk of debris and lower nozzle pressures. And that was kind of the approach we took. And so far, fingers crossed, we're on the right path. So we'll see where it goes from there. But I think that was the way we approached it, and it seemed to work.
Good. Matt Worley?
I think one of the greatest things to change some attitudes is to get the conversation started. And I think that's why these webcasts have done so well so far, is that they've started some conversation, reached out, a handful of guys have reached out, right? Guys, the Chad Roberts, Dave Walker, Jimmy Hart, Riley McGilloway, Craig Cunningham, those guys that have reached out aside from these webcasts and said, hey, give me a little more info on this, or great job, let's start the conversation going. I think that's a lot of where it starts, is just getting this conversation started so that more people start talking about it and start talking about what's Toronto doing, what's, the cities in the west of Ontario doing versus the cities in the east of Ontario doing. And if we can get that conversation started, it's going to open up some minds and start to hopefully change some attitudes on, well, if Toronto's doing it, with a 65 millimeter and an 1.125" smooth bore, maybe that's something we should look at, or at least start talking about.
Good, thanks, Matt. I'm going to send it over to Matt Baca.
I think they're all really good points. I really like Rob's point about the pre-service approach to it. I think one of the biggest things to change, though, if you're looking at attitude, is you have to start at the very bottom and you have to start at your implementation stage. When you're looking at typically a medium, small department, there's a committee that's usually formed studying what's going on in high-rise across the places. The problem is sometimes you even have fight back at the beginning, right, where certain individuals might be selected over under individuals for who knows why they did them on the committee. The biggest thing we found here when some of it started was, how can we use the floor to create the buy-in? So prime example was starting with the implementation of just the Denver load from the PAL pack for ergonomics. So changing the attitude there by saying like, okay, this is better for me to carry, started the buy-in. But in the beginning, we had to have the floor come on board of, this is something to progress better, not coming at them with, we're just going to do this because everybody's doing it. It was a buy-in of, here's how to make it better for us and progress it forward to where we want to go over time, not just throwing the whole kind of cannon shot at them at once.
Good. That's a good point. Baby steps. We all know at the end result, we wanted smoothbore nozzles, and that's seems to be the flavor of the day for everybody. But also we want to meet those water requirements. So that will come. I get that. All right. And then we'll go on to Brent Brooks.
What we had to do in Toronto was we had to change the attitude of the people making the decisions on the equipment and the type of building we were fighting fires in. We had exhausted the fire service as far as gathering information, and it just didn't have any teeth when you're talking to guys with 35 plus years on the job who have always done it a certain way and had been successful. Because we have so many buildings in Toronto, I went outside and I went to the council tall buildings, and then I started talking to designers and architects that actually made the buildings within our city. And I asked them, how do you expect, or how would you like us to fight a fire in your building? And they would tell us. And I'd ask them, how do you expect us to get smoke out of your building? And then they would tell us. Then I went to the University of Toronto, same type of thing. I talked to people that do wind study. I talked to people that do hydraulics and how they relate to our city's buildings. I took that to management and I said, hey, did you know that every single high-rise building designer in our city expects us to use the 65 millimeter hose line? And they said, no, we didn't. They go, where's your proof? And I'm sending them documents that weren't firefighting related proof. Like, here's University of Toronto. Here's the engineer place out of Guelph. And now we have whole new evidence that they haven't seen before. And that was the kind of the door opening for us.
Thanks, Brent. Anything further, Mark?
No, I don't think so. I think we could tie us into training now, perhaps. We've looked at so far attitude as far as a department as a whole, looking at the high-rise standpipe situation. I don't think we looked at too much from the individual perspective, the attitudes that a firefighter brings to the high-rise standpipe operation challenge. And I think we've seen this quite a bit in the past in our own departments, as far as individuals rejecting or digging their heels in, or being very vocal with, why are we doing this? Why are you instituting these changes? Why are you making me work harder? Why are you making me carry a bigger hose? Why am I carrying more equipment? And that attitude from the individual has to, I think, be addressed as well, that we are seeing more of that happening or occurring quite more frequently from the ground level, as opposed from the top coming down, from the bottom coming up. So with the attitude, let's look at the attitude from the firefighter that we deal with, who we work with. Why do we have individuals rejecting or digging their heels in with the suggestion or with the evidence, as Brent mentioned, facts, data, showing that we're expected to use a certain size hose line, with bringing more equipment up or having more manpower? And why are we having individuals grumbling and wanting to go back, as I mentioned, go back to the old days and holding on to the past. Why do we have that? Why is that there?
Oh, can I step in on that? Well, a couple of things is we've had some established things come out of, and most of our management has gone to the OFM and taken their high-rise courses through them, and whatever evidence base they had at the time, it was based on older technology and older news. So, and I don't begrudge Fred Mackay. He put on a program, but it is outdated now, and yet still the OFM is pushing it, and I'm running into instructors that are still taking the OFM Freddie Mackay's program, and they're making that as their backbone for their high-rise programs. So that is one thing. We've got to change management's idea of, things are changing. And as Brent said, he has taken that evidence forward, and that evidence is showing that, we have to start to adopt different methods of fighting high-rise fires, all right? And change the attitude of, I guess it's going to be the hard thing, but changing the attitude of our management team. You concur, Brent?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You got to show them something new, something they haven't heard before, something, and back it up with math and science. Just before this started, you guys were talking about nozzle reactions and pressures. When I got on the job, it was either the hard hose or the easy hose. We didn't have the science to go with it. Now we do. So we got to use that to our advantage.
Good. Yeah. And
Mike,
go ahead.
I'm glad you mentioned the OFM. That's a very good point to make about the OFM. And if I can make a plea to the Ontario Fire Service as a whole, from a firefighter, I'm just a firefighter. I'm not a captain, lieutenant. I'm the guy in the back who does the work, the grunt. To those in positions of management, do not look to the OFM as the only source of information for how we need to approach, in this case, high-rise / standpipe operations. They are not the experts in this area. And I bet you money, I'll bet money that if you went and talked to the OFM, they would defer you to somebody else because they don't have really a good grasp themselves on how to deal with a high-rise or standpipe situation. It's good to get information from them. They're not going to be the only source, but please, my plea to you is look at all the sources. There are many people, many entities that you could go and approach that would have lots of information, who have spent time and the money to investigate and look into these high-rise or standpipe situations, who would be more than glad to give information to you. And just because it says OFM doesn't mean that they're the experts. And what I find a lot of times is firefighters, officers, departments, if it's labeled or slapped OFM on it, then it's gospel truth. And that's all they want to look at. But there's more than just the OFM in this situation as far as high-rise standpipes up to look at and to consider that we could benefit from. So my plea to the fire service is look beyond the OFM. Open the eyes, open the doors, and go out there and knock on other doors to see what else can we get for information, data, resources. Brent already alluded to a couple of them already. He himself went and did that. If he hadn't done that, would the top brass in Toronto Fire have thought of themselves to go and do? Maybe yes, maybe no. But there are other resources out there besides just the OFM.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Matt Worley, what do you think on that?
Well, I'm gonna jump on that too, and I'm gonna sort of piggyback a little bit on what Schmitt said and what Matt Baca said. First and foremost, you can write this one down. Training should be empowering, not humiliating. That's on us. So if we kind of take one step back to the attitude change, that's on us. I look at this panel, we're all instructors here. We need to change our attitude, that we need to give whoever we are teaching everything we have. We can't hold back. We need to give them everything, because we need to empower those students, whoever they may be, to learn as much as we know, because that's the only way. Like Baca said, that's the only way we're going to get it from the ground up, right? Because we're not teaching management. We don't get management coming to our classes. We get students, we get firefighters, we get rookies, we get recruits, we get the people that want to know more. And that's on us to give them everything we have so that they can start to build that change with us. And we need to sort of change that attitude altogether through training to bring everybody up to where we need to be.
Thanks, Matt. We'll go on to Matt Baca again.
So Matt brings up a good point there, and Mark Vandervijs brought up a good point earlier. But I think we have to study when you want to make change in your department is we can call it generations, right? The much more senior generation came into the fire service was very authoritative, right? They were just told what to do. There was no questions asked, and it's kind of this is how we do it, and this is why, and that's all you need to know. Where if you actually go to the younger generation and you study those medium, small size departments, a lot of recruits now are coming in very highly educated with experience, with more courses than half the people have on the job now. So when you start talking about change in attitude, that you almost have to have a balance in between is how do we have the generation that never really had input and have them buy in, when also taking the input of the newer generation of saying, hey, you guys have done some stuff. What do you think? So you kind of have to balance the two, which is, I think, the hard part here is how do you capture two audiences right now in the generation of the fire service with your overall goal?
We'll go on to, a few years ago, I was feeling pretty burnt out, and then somebody invited me to take the nozzle forward course with Aaron Fields. And that few days we were with Aaron, I had an epiphany and started believing in the job again. And the biggest point that I took from that, or one of the bigger points, is water boils from the bottom. From that day forward, I have made it my mission to teach the younger people and bring up whatever change that needs to be done from the bottom up right now. And hopefully management starts to see how efficient it is. That's how I've decided on it. And that's an attitude change that I made, and it developed into something that I see working now. And so what do you think about that, Rob Wiggins?
Yep, all great points. Jerry Herbst brings up a good point whenever he's discussing stuff like this. And he says, you know, when you're talking about change, be careful not to slam the current product in the current system, because the guy you're slamming it to may have been involved in that design. And it kind of touches on what Baca was saying about the level of education and experience that guys and girls are coming in the job now with, and walking that line of lots of courses, lots of experience. How do you meet in the middle? Because the two need to relate to each other, or you're going to segregate one of those two groups. I think the biggest thing too is, especially in talking with tactics, even if you're on a super progressive department, which I've been lucky enough to be on, you know, 2 of them, there are certain disciplines that you can't sit back and wait to be spoon-fed the information. You have to go out and, like you said, you know, touching on nozzle forward and even the Canadian high-rise conference, the majority of those people were there seeking that knowledge, because with the sharing on social media, and even this meeting as an example, we're 3 episodes in, the inboxes are blowing up. We're talking coast to coast to coast, and even down south with people sharing ideas. So it's not just a network of Ontario anymore. It's what's going on everywhere. And I think the biggest thing is it's shocking how many people are in the same boat and going through exactly what the majority of us in Ontario are going through. And just one last point I'll make is whatever we do, you have to make it relatable to the D squad, because your A squad's not always going to be on. And like Matt said, training has to be empowering. So if these guys who have been labeled the D squad, they may have been taking a beating in training for years because they made one mistake and it's haunted them, and now they don't want to go. So they don't want to go and get embarrassed that they might not know something.
I'm a D guy.
What's that? You froze out of me, Mike. But anyway,
D shift.
I am not talking shifts. I'm just saying, you know, everybody knows what we're talking about. But those guys might have been labeled that for no reason or no fault of their own, right? So I think if you can get back into training and get people excited to be there and get everybody on the same page of having a great time. And I'll use, you know, shout out to Paul Milton, as he's referred to. He's taken and invigorated a whole bunch of people in a department that I won't name. And it's just that attitude of getting everyone excited again, right? So anyways, that's it for me on that. Thanks.
Excellent. Excellent. Mark Schmitt?
Yeah, a couple of great points there, Mike. You really kind of nailed it for me too. I was in a low point in my career as well, and I got invited to go to FDIC, and I came back from there, and I was on fire. And I think I went 3 years in a row to FDIC, and then got introduced down there to a guy named Aaron Fields, and brought him up here to Canada after he was in Sarnia. And it changed a lot of stuff for the department I was in. It got us working on stuff. We myself and a couple of guys took the point of, it's going to be hard to change the attitudes of the guys at the top, but we know those young guys that are coming in, they're eager to learn stuff. We're going to start giving them the nozzle forward stuff there, and before long, more people than not that are on the hand line will understand that nozzle forward program. And that's kind of the way we changed. I think we've done 350 students since 2015. This doesn't really pertain to high rise per se, but it's just that starting with a group of people that are willing to be part of it, that are excited about the training, and get them excited about high rise, and get them involved in some stuff. I keep suggesting to the new guys that come on, you spend a lot of money to get to this point. Don't stop spending money on yourself, because the training division isn't always going to give you the training you were hoping to get. So go find it. I don't think any of us would be here today if we hadn't gone and sourced out some of our own training, and then shared it with the people around us. So, training wise, go seek out the stuff you want. Talk to us. We'll share where we learned stuff from, and you can go to the same place we learned it. And yeah, just get. I can't remember who it said it, but be positive about the training, and it's contagious. It'll keep happening.
Sure. So right to Brent Brooks now, and Brent had a pretty good story. Right now we've got a class of 45 students in our class, and we went through the high-rise, both packages, because that's where we're still in the transition. And Brent, you can allude to the story then from there.
Yeah, so they're actually able to try both packages on different days. And they were asking, why was there more nozzle reaction, and why was the smaller diameter hose harder to move? And they started asking me the questions, which actually made it really, really easy, because now they're going to go back to the trucks. They're going to say, yeah, we use the 65 and the 38 at the academy, and we all like the 65. We were carrying it up and down stairs. We were moving it no problem with 2 firefighters. And now our newbies are kind of teaching our teaching guys that got lots of years on the job. I just want to add to Mark's thing too. He said, don't go to one source. So, there's multiple sources. Doesn't matter, what country you're in. It's all high-rise related stuff. Don't go to one source. Keep looking. There's always something new out there. That one's upside down, right? Dave McGrail. Everybody has some type of source that's related to high-rise firefighting. You just got to go out and find it. And once you find it, put that in your evidence to bring it forward to change management's attitude.
Very good. Thank you. All right, Mark, we'll come. We'll bring it around. We talked about attitude. Now we'll talk about training. All right.
Training attitudes go together, right? And in the case of the high-rise and the standpipe situation or challenges, there's always a challenge with training in the high-rise or standpipe situation or operations. And we look at in the general broad spectrum of training, departments, of course, want to do it economically, so it won't be a cost killer or cost prohibitive in terms of the dollar cost associated with it. And in the case of high-rise or standpipe training, there is no real way to shortcut it. And I think for the benefit of us all, we'll cut right to the chase. This has to be hands-on. It has to be a tactile approach with high-rise or standpipe operations. The notion that we can learn in a classroom is only limited. The classroom portion may lend into, as Brent mentioned, some of the information that we glean from books on data, nozzle reactions, and flow rates, and looking at heat release rates and fuel loads and kilowatts and megawatts and so on. That's good for the classroom portion, but it doesn't take or replace the whole aspect of training in high-rise or standpipe operations. There's got to be the application of that knowledge hands-on wise. So the individuals such as yourselves who learn hands-on can make the connection from here to here, that, yeah, now I see it. And now I know why we want to have this much water flowing, or, for a smooth bore nozzle, fatter water droplets for more heat absorption based on heat release rates. And we see that. We can see this evidence in our hands-on training. So hands-on has to be done for high-rise operations. And we cannot have any duplication of that in terms of let's try and do it virtually. Let's try and do it by computer-based learning. Let's try and do it by virtual reality, or maybe some still pictures, and we go for a walking tour and just look and point and talk. It has to be hands-on. Get the equipment out, go to a building, hook it up, stretch it, advance it. What problems that building present to us? Discuss it, try and get around it, and actually charge the lines with water, because it's different holding a dry line versus a line full of water, charge hand line, and trying to get that in position, so on. So it has to be hands-on. And I know that we are trying to get into the modern age of, again, using computers for our virtual training and stuff, but it doesn't replace what we have to have built up for muscle memory with skill development. And nothing's going to do that except good old-fashioned hard work, hands-on, and putting the time in to getting that training done, so that we're well versed in how to use our own equipment and how we're able to prove our SOGs in terms of, in this case, high-rise or standpipe equipped buildings.
Very good. You brought up several good points. Firefighters generally by nature are tactile learners, and our ability to retain is definitely a lot better when we're doing it hands-on, and I agree with that 100%. The challenges are, where do you do a hands-on? So I'll throw that over to Mark Schmitt.
Yeah, I mean, again, my department's pretty fortunate in the fact we have a very nice training center equipped with standpipes in it. The downside to it is when they built it, they didn't think about how to get rid of the water that might be flowed in it. So we're kind of limited in the amount of water we can flow in, but we can certainly wet lines and so on. Honestly, I mean, the best high-rise training I've had has been at Pensacola, where we're actually in a building and charging actual standpipes and flowing water off of those standpipes. By far the best I've had. We did a heck of a job at the high-rise conference here in the Falls, getting guys to flow water off of standpipe equipment. Probably the best that I've done in my career here in Canada. It's hard to find a building that someone's willing to let you wet lines in and not be concerned about what's the financial damage or the potential financial damage of that water inside the building. So, really, I have a rookie on my crew, and we do a lot of stuff right in the truck bay, and we have a hose pipe that comes off of that's 1 3/4 inch, and we use that to simulate all of our training, really, because that's what we have, and then I can at least with her, I can at least say, remember what we did in the bay when we're in the high rise? So this is how that would look here, right? It's not perfect, but it's working for us. So, or at least for the people that want to train on the crew. Otherwise, it's disappointing, because we have this facility that could be so great to train high rise in, and we're kind of very limited as to how much we can do within the building itself. So it's kind of my 2 cents. We do have a great fire building as well, with a long hallway in the back with 2 standpipe connections in it, and I've done a bunch of stuff with recruits. Wet lines is charging right in the dirty hallway, in the clean stairwell, stretching onto the fire, clogged nozzles, the whole works, changing the tip out, all that stuff. Showing them that we can flow with just the bail if you have to. Did a lot of that training with the last couple of classes. So there is some young people in the system now that do understand standpipe operations to a certain extent. Still, I think the biggest roadblock we run into is understanding where that water is coming from once we're inside that high-rise structure. There's still too many people thinking we're pumping that water, and it's not the fire pump, and we're not looking at the fire pump to make sure that it's pumping and working correctly and all of those good things. So it just forces home that fact we have to have that equipment to take it up with us to make sure we're getting the pressure in the hand line that we're expecting to be getting, and that we're flowing the amount of water that we think we're going to be flowing.
Good. Thanks, Mark. I got to go to Brent Brooks then, right on that one.
Yeah, Mark nailed again with the hands-on for training. I remember my senior man, when I first started getting interested in high-rise, he said, hey, you know how to cut a roof hatch, right? You just climb the ladder, cut the lock, and open it up. I'm like, yeah. He was okay, let's move on. And it was something that that was the only time we ever trained on it, and it sounds so simple. Then I get a fire. The first thing I do is I climb the roof hatch, and I realize, oh my gosh, this isn't a climbing angle. This is straight up and down. I got all this gravity holding me back. Then I realized that I needed an area belt because I couldn't use the 24-inch bolt cutters to cut the lock. Then I realized that the 24-inch bolt cutters were too small. So then I got the 30. Then I realized at 30, I couldn't open them wide enough to get up into the roof hatch. So make a long story short, something as simple as climbing and opening up a roof hatch without the hands-on training, you just don't realize what you're missing. So yeah, nice one, Mark, with the hands-on.
Okay. Let's go to Matt Baca.
Agree with both Brent and Mark. I think Mark brought up some main points. Where we are right now, we don't have a training center. But I think the biggest thing that we always seem to forget is, like, almost every fire hall we look in, there's a pumper sitting there with a 65 millimeter discharge. And almost every hall you go into, there's the same thing, a 38 or 65 millimeter wall fill for the truck. Where we are, we found a lot of advantages. Last shift, same thing. We just went through our entire high-rise operation, went up to simulate the floor. We connected to the wall hydrant there, and we just stretched the lines, practice stretching the kit, and charging the line, just so we had that basic practice down. But I think sometimes we try to look at what happens at H-Rock and bigger facilities when you can really look out your back door and create something that will simulate what you're doing. Although I do agree, the advantages of being able to go to an actual high-rise in that, if you can do it, go by all means do it. But finding someone to let you in without the possibility of water damage is still the biggest tricky, I guess, hurdle to overcome.
Very good. Thank you.
Hey, Mike, I want to jump in here for a quick second. Two quick points I want to kind of bring up with our discussion about training. One, location. Where can we do it? Some departments have training towers, some don't. Where I am, we don't have anything. Not yet. It's coming, but it's not there yet. So where do we go to train on high-rise standpipe stuff? Municipalities have many departments besides just the fire. They have building departments, engineering, they have garbage, and so on. So we have access to resources that we can use from the inside. And it might take a bit of initiative on maybe the training officer or somebody in that higher capacity that may need to go and network with people in the building department or the engineering department to try and say, hey, we need access to playgrounds, because our playground is these buildings. It's not a computer screen, a classroom. It's not going to be the bay. We go to fight a fire in these kind of buildings. So we need access to playgrounds. And when you, Mr. Building Department guy, or Mr. Engineer who issues the permits for demolition or for construction, can we not forward some kind of agreement that when these individuals want to tear a building down or erect a building of such nature, that we get access to it for a period of time to go in and do some hands-on training? The best, of course, is when they're taking a building down for demolition purposes. That's the best time, because at that point, damage is not a concern because it's being destroyed anyway. So we can go in there and have lots of fun in terms of hooking up standpipes and flowing water and forcing open doors and even bringing in fake smoke to make it all the more realistic. But it's got to be given access to us. And a lot of times I drive around in different municipalities, even my own backyard where I work, and I'm watching a building being torn down, and hey, that's a perfect spot for us to go and do some training. How come we can't use it or didn't get a chance to use it before they start knocking it down? And that disconnect between our own internal departments has to be removed and broken. We got to get access to these buildings, especially ones that are going up. I'll give an example. There was two that are being built where I work in my city, and we were there to do a tour while it's being built. And while we're there, we spoke with the building site superintendent, and I happened to mention to him exactly what I was hoping to do. Could we get access to use your facility, your high rise here in the construction, to do certain things like hit the standpipe, charge the FDC, maybe charge a few lines, stretcher lines, and so on. And he was more than glad to say, yeah, absolutely, come on back. Give me a call, we'll arrange the time, and you're more than welcome to come and do it. Where it stopped was on our side with our higher up saying, no way, because of the liability purposes that were mentioned by a few of us already in terms of what if there's any kind of water damage. Well, there's going to be that risk, correct. It's going to be there. But if we're given access to use these places, we need to take advantage of it. Even for a big box store that's being built, an industrial complex that's, you know, big as can be as far as large area square footage, they're going to have standpipes in there that we need to use and get familiar with. And if they're under construction being built with no concrete floor being poured yet, or there is a concrete floor poured and it's still putting in the rest of the stuff on the inside, if we get access to use it, then let's use it. It's going to give us a chance to get ourselves with actual real lines hooked up with real water flowing and working on a real playground that we're building the muscle memory for the future down the road. So we got to get access to the buildings. I remember Clark Lamping, we're down there in Firehouse in Las Vegas this year in February teaching, Matt and myself, and we're talking with Clark Lamping there. He mentioned that they had 1 year access to a high-rise casino being knocked down. That was being demoed. And it was, I forget how many stories, maybe 25, 30 stories high. But it was a playground of playgrounds to use for training purposes. And he mentioned how they got a lot of people on board to make this happen. And when it happened, it was a fantastic place for those guys down there in Clark County to use their skills and exercise the muscle memory to be proficient with hitting standpipes and laying in line and doing searches and so on. It was a great aspect, a great benefit for them. So it works for everybody, and we got to get access if we can to those buildings. The second point is this, with training. When we think about training for a high-rise or standpipe stuff, we automatically go to, we got to do all of it, right? Hit the standpipe, stretch lines, flow water, do searches. But if we look at it from a segmented point of view where we can segment the training in different aspects of the high-rise or standpipe operation, focus on one segment at a time, you'd be amazed that one segment can fit in almost anywhere that we can find access to use as far as a temporary playground. So Mark Schmitt mentioned the bay for certain things. Matt Baca mentioned every fire department has an engine there with a 2.5-inch discharge or a wall FDC. And again, we can segment our training. So let's look at one night or one day, for example, with our crew on just securing the fire department connection. That can be done anywhere. You can get any building you can get access to, pull up to it with your engine, and for a quick half hour, 45 minutes, go over how to secure the standpipe or the FDC by running 2.5-inch lines, hooking it up, checking for debris, discussing different swivel options. If the swivels are seized, how to still make your connections with your hose. What else? Charging, tying it off for safety. That can all be done right there in one small location anywhere. That's a segmented block of training for high-rise standpipe stuff done. Or let's look at standpipe kits, just the kit by itself. What's involved in the kit? Who grabs what? We could practice carrying the kits up 10 stories and then bringing it back down. Again, doesn't involve charging hand lines or charging standpipes, but it's segmented and focusing on one key aspect of the bigger operation. So if we as instructors that are on shift, training officers working within the division of our fire department, if we start breaking things down by segments and into smaller blocks, we can see how we can make great progress with meeting the training challenges that we have to meet, and hopefully gain access into playgrounds to use and do these things on a much more frequent basis.
Bring up a couple good points, and I'm going to jump in. Sorry, Matt Worley wanted to talk. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I really like this approach that Mark Vanderfeist's talking about. Small digestible chunks. If we want to change attitude, like you said earlier, Mike, when we throw all of that high-rise stuff at a crew, you get a lot of pushback. Try to change it in small digestible chunks. Do the thing that Schmitt does, right? Hook up to your truck. Do what Baca does. Hook up in your haul. After that, take that next step. Start looking at your standpipe kits. Go to a multi-story outdoor parking garage. It's got a standpipe, right? Hook up to that. We can flow water without impacting the building itself, right? We don't have to worry about wet carpets and whatnot. We can flow lots of water in a multi-story parking garage. We can work through all that stuff. We can work hard and train through our progressiveness, all our steps, and we can get to where, you know, a little more hands-on, a little more training for our, we can all of a sudden take a look at, are we running an 1 3/4 line with a 7/8? Or are we going to try now the 2.5 with an 1 1/8 tip, right? All of a sudden we're running 100 gallons a minute more. What's that in liters? Anybody who can convert?
That's 4.
300 and something, 380, 390 liters more a minute through a hose that's 3/4 of an inch bigger, right? We can do this stuff, but we need to step it. We need to be progressive in our training, do those little baby steps, but we can do that at our halls and then start to work it out into our places in our neighborhoods to work through it.
Very good. And a couple of, Bill Gustin was huge on that, and I took that, and quite a few years ago, I used to take the crews to parking garages, and we got to use our new hose package quite a while ago, and we got to use it there. So again, changing the attitude of training is, again, Matt Baca brings up a great point of those little progressions, all right? And we're doing that. We kind of, in Toronto, threw it all at ourselves at once. And we're working on it. We're backtracking, and we're going to start getting it forward. We do have momentum, which is fantastic. But like I've always said as an instructor, is I want to break down each task so that, like when I was a coach in hockey or lacrosse, I broke it down into those little tiny things when you're young, so you get those parts. And so when you're finally like where we're supposed to be, you don't have to worry about that. All right. At 3 o'clock in the morning, you don't worry about, you know, how I'm going to hook it up, because it's just going to be automatic. You're not going to worry about, you know, the little munition part of stuff. You're going to worry about actually doing the task. And that's hopefully when we get our training for our high-rise thing coming up, that's what we look at. All right. Is breaking it down into those segments, and we get to practice them. And as for, I don't know how we're ever changing the attitude with our management teams on how we can use decommissioned buildings or buildings that are going to be demolished. That is a huge thing. We've had some black operations opportunities, and however, that's not the right way. Black operations training is only going to be get people in trouble. If we can get managed to endorse, now I'm not sure how we're going to do that, but that's something that we have to look into. What do you think about that, Rob Wiggins?
Yeah, amazing points. I'll only add a couple things. I think Mark brought up a great point, Verify's did, on you can't smash everyone with the online training. I think we got lost in that the online training was supposed to save us the time on the hands-on days, so that we're not drowning people in PowerPoints for 2 hours. Everybody's tired. Okay, now let's quickly rush through these drills, and now no one has time to get it done. It was supposed to supplement so everyone's armed with the knowledge for when they come. Everyone can take time to research it on their own. That way, there's not any, oh crap, I didn't understand what he meant. Now it's my turn next. It gives everyone that pause and that breath to go fill in the blanks, show up, ready to roll. And what we've done is we've replaced it completely, and we lost the hands-on component. So even if you are in a situation where you have to play on the bay floor and stretch from the truck, and everyone's got a man door on the apparatus floor, well, there's your apartment door. Show attacking from the hinges versus the latch side, how that affects door control and how that affects the hose moving through. Nice and easy evolution. And then if you are in a position where you can't get that hands-on training, you have things like the CHC, and that's where you're going to go and put the, you know, where the rubber's going to meet the road, and you're going to get that knowledge that you already have, meet it up with a whole bunch of other people from the province, and get to practice what you've been planning. That's it for me.
Thanks, Rob. All right, we'll go to Mark Schmitt.
Yeah, I don't know what else to tell you guys. Training wise, it's just, you know, I like Mark's point about you know, making it into little pieces and attacking those little pieces one step at a time. using the things that are available to you. I know the biggest we run into all the time is that let's face it, our chiefs, our risk managers, and when you ask about going into a building we don't own and potentially causing damage, the risk warning light goes off in every office and no one wants anything to do with it. So, we've had some limited success in getting a hold of some houses to use. We haven't had any success yet in getting into a place that's being basically torn down or retrofitted that is a standpipe equipped to go play in. It's been a roadblock for several years now. We've been able to get into buildings under construction, but they won't let us charge the standpipe system. They'll let us go in and see the building construction and all that kind of stuff. And but we can't. They won't. They're worried about that risk. So that's kind of the biggest roadblock to us. And like I said, the flip side is we go to our training center and they're worried about the risk of flowing water inside the training center and causing damage. So I just end up practicing in the bay or out in the parking lot somewhere. I put pictures up on the weekend of us pumping and flowing water in a parking lot. So you go where you can go to do the things you want to work on. And it's all the stuff I'm doing with the crew at work right now is little segmented pieces of stuff and putting it together so that, again, we've got a young person, she's got a year on the job, and it's just trying to keep her good at all the little things so that when we do get something that's working, she can work at it. So
you mentioned, Mark, about risk, that whenever it's mentioned to a chief or a management person that, the risk involved in using a real building and flowing water is great, and they look at the risk and so on from a liability financial standpoint. Let's discuss risk for a second. Our number of structure fires for our departments, each of us in a year, might account for 10% of our total call volume. Of that 10%, how many are actual high-rise or standpipe type of fires? Maybe 0.1, maybe 1% of that 10%. So the number of calls that we go to that are high-rise or standpipe related are very minimal or small in number, but the risk associated with that call because of the less frequency of us responding to it is higher. So in the grand scheme of liability, should a department go to a high-rise call or a standpipe fire and one of the members dies because of X number of reasons in that whole operation, what's the risk now to the department in terms of that one firefighter being killed in the line of duty? Pretty high, very great. The risk that we face, high risk, low frequency event. We go to a high-rise fire once every who knows how often for some departments, and we don't do it all the time. The training's not done all the time on it. The place of practice isn't available for us to hone our skills, and we're going into a firefight with the skill set of a kindergarten kid sometimes, because we're not well versed and well practiced in this particular area of our industry. And when we get caught that way, the risk is great. We get hurt. We got problems. Someone doesn't do well in terms of on the fire side. So because of that risk, we have to somehow, if we could, convince the chiefs, the white shirts, and those in management that, yes, there's a risk to be taken in going into a real building that's occupied or being used by somebody, owned by somebody else, and doing a few things. And there's going to be some give and take. I understand that. Maybe we can't charge lines, only do dry lines. But the ones that are willing to let us do it, to go in and actually use wet lines in their live building, we've got to somehow convince that the risk associated with that is lower than the risk associated when we go fight the real thing. And we're not that well prepared because we don't have the access to these buildings and we can't practice on our own playgrounds. We have to somehow relate this to the professional sports that we all like to watch, or other specialized teams like Navy SEALs, who their main job is to go and do tactical warfare maneuvers in the dead of night or in the cloak of secrecy. And they don't have time to, or they can't afford, not to have the time to put in to practice and hone their skills in the very playground they're going to play in, with all the environmental sounds, all the environmental temperatures, all the smells, everything is real, because when it comes time to deploy and do the actual mission, it's not going to be different. I was reading a book a little while ago, by an individual named something Rosebush, about the art of speaking, so on and so forth. And he quotes a commander or military commander from the U.S. military about specialized teams like the Navy SEALs. And this one commander said that they practice 3/4 of the time for only 25% of the actual event. And what that goes to show is they're spending more time practicing and getting ready for the 25% of deployments they actually go on to use those skills. And that same mindset needs to be adapted into the fire service. We need to be practicing 75% more or of the time for the 25% that we're actually going to go and fight residential fires, or in this case, high rise and standpipe operational fires. And so somehow we got to convince those upper people the risk that's associated with us using those buildings is not that great. And if we do have some proper protocols in place and some give and take with negotiating in terms of the building owners, with what we can and can't do, what they're going to let us do, and our own bosses and so on, we can accomplish something. We can get access. And I think the biggest proof of that is with us. We did the conference last year in Niagara Falls at the Hilton Hotel. And we're going to be there again in 2021. We had to cancel for this year because of coronavirus, but for 2020, we're back there again in May. And we're going to do the exact same thing. Use that real building to train, a playground for us to do tactical searches and fly standpipes and 2.5-inch stretches and elevator rescue. All that fun stuff is being done in that real building to give us, again, a good set of hands-on skill training. And if we can do it with the Hilton Hotel, of course, there's business to it. No, they're bringing in people to stay there and they're making money off it. But the point is, they're willing to share their building to allow us to practice and hone our skills. And if they are other building owners in our backyards who are protected by us, we'll do the same thing. Just got to convince our higher ups, our white shirts, that it's well worth the while for us to take advantage of it and use it somehow.
Yeah, again, I 100% agree with everything you said there. And it's that high risk, low frequency thing we got to start selling to the, I'm pretty sure it's really a suck and blow situation, because management's on about cutting budgets and stuff like that, and we're not running them so much, so we're going to cut staffing. However, when we do get one, it turns into a freaking nightmare. So we need to get them to talk about the high risk, low frequency, especially in this fact of training. And what we've all found as instructors, and I think that most everybody else that's listening, is if you're not comfortable with the situation, or at 3 o'clock in the morning, you revert to something that it doesn't work generally. If you're not practicing it all the time, you're going to revert to something that's dangerous and it's going to hurt you. So we have to keep that in mind, that when we talk to our white shirts or our management, is that we have to be practicing these skill sets in order that it becomes second nature and habitual. All right, because that's human nature. And as soon as stress happens, what happens to us? We start to lose that focus. We've talked about it on the other two discussions as well. We start losing, and we focus on to, we lose focus, and we start to make bad decisions. So training is the ultimate thing, and hands-on training is what firefighters need. We are tactile. We're not very good at that. What I also like to do is when I'm teaching, is I try to tell the students to do the e-learning the night before, come in, then we do the practical, and then go back and do the e-learning that night afterward, so that if they have any questions on the first night, then they can come in and do the hands-on, especially in a high-rise situation, because it's new. And then we come back and then they can go, oh yeah, that's why that was done, right? And it seems to fortify it. And then next time they do it, at least it's going to be the same process. And that's one way that I like to do it. So we'll go on to, what do you think about that, Mark Vanderfeis?
Well, I like it. What more can we say about it? and we can beat this to death much as we possibly could, but the end result, I think, has to be there's got to be change made from all aspects. It's not just from one approach, but from many different fronts that needs to be initiated by each individual. So what can we do? Well, we have a panel of people here. So those who are listening and watching, by all means, you can reach out just as we do. We make contact with people who we wonder or who we respect and say, okay, we have a problem. How can I get around this? What do you suggest? So use us as a sounding board. By all means, reach out, contact any one of us by email or by other means. And we're more than glad to share with you what could be done, maybe a different perspective of how to approach something as opposed to what's not been worked so far. And that's going to help, I think, as someone else mentioned, that there's other people that we can draw upon besides just one or two people in the forefront.
Okay, we're coming up on an hour and a half. Brent Brooks, just talk quickly on how, because we're going to be doing our training very shortly.
So what we've been doing, when we run alarm calls, we're being invited into that building, if it's residential or commercial, and I'll go up and investigate the alarms. Let's say it's a pot on the stove, and we can downgrade the call. I'll look at my crew and I'll say, okay, stretch, hook that standpipe up and stretch. Here's our fire apartment, and they'll do that. Obviously, they're not going to charge them flow. I'd like that to happen, but we just can't do it. And then I time them. So I said, you know what, took you a minute and 45 seconds. Now they're excited about the next alarm call because they know they get to stretch, and now they're going to try and beat their time of a minute and 45 seconds. So now they want to train, they want to try and beat their next time. Then with the other truck in the station, I said, we can hook up in a minute and 45 seconds. How you guys doing? Well, we've never timed it. And now we start getting the other trucks involved with making a little bit of a timing and a competition. And we're doing it in buildings that we're getting invited into. It's great.
So we're going to sum it up, Benny. Again, I'll quickly talk about changing the attitude. We got to change the attitude yet. Firefighting is what we've done prior is always going to be that one we always go to, but things have changed in the high-rise fire game. They have. And the compartmental, even compartmental fires are starting to prove to be a little bit, and then the other thing is 100-year fires. Everybody keeps saying, well, we don't get that fire, except that, like I said before, that 100-year fire could be next year, 2. You could have them back to back, or you could have 3 in a row. All right. So we should be practicing and trained to that 100-year fire so that we're not reactive and we are proactive on every one of them. That's how it should be. And that's my summary. If we want to go down the panel and we'll summarize, please. We'll start with Matt Baca.
No, I agree with your statement, Mike. I think the big thing and the big takeaway from this is don't stop training. And no matter what department you come from, your size, your resources and everything, keep it basic. Do like Mark Vanderfeist said, start with one implementation of the start of it and work your way through and break everything down. But basically, don't stop training on all the basics and just keep progressing as far as you can.
Thank you. Rob Wiggins.
Yeah, just keep going forward. Nothing's going to happen overnight. And, even if it, like Baca was saying, they're doing it in stages. If it takes stages, great. If you can take a whole attack package and do a changeover because you have the buy-in, as you said, water boils from the bottom. Great, do it, but don't expect it to happen overnight, but keep that forward momentum going. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Rob. We'll go to Matt Worley.
Thanks, Mike. Once again, just thanks for having me in on these sessions. We've had these 3 sessions. If it's one thing I can say, it's we need to change those attitudes. We need to change the training, because if we change the training, it's going to change the attitude to how we're doing things. Do me a favor. Grab that rookie. Grab that one rookie. The one with the spark in their eye, the one that wants to learn. Grab that rookie. Go onto the bay floor. Start to teach them. Start to empower them. Give them everything that you know. Boil that water from the bottom up. Start that conversation at the table. The more people we can train that way, the easier that change is going to be, because we're just going to see that change come right up from the bottom. So do me that favor, grab that rookie.
Thanks, Matt.
Mike.
Mark Schmitt.
Yeah, I agree. Matt nailed it right there. I love the grab the rookie and make that water boil from the bottom. The other thing is that it was when you're going to present, much like Brent's talked a little bit, and I think Matt has too, is do your homework. You know, get some information from the departments around you of similar size or the exact size as you, what they're doing, what you want to do, the reasons why you want to do it. Have a business plan basically, and push it forward. Sooner or later, you'll find, much like you have that one rookie that'll listen, you'll find that one chief that'll listen. And then you'll have that one chief on your side and it'll start to snowball a little bit and you'll be able to make change. I was once asked one time by the health and safety committee, how'd you make that change so quickly? I said, I didn't come with the problem. I came with the solutions, right? To make those solutions easy for the white shirts and they'll happen fast. That's it.
Excellent point. Brent Brooks.
For training, I would say try to make it not boring. So let's say someone's going to come to a class on stack effect. Yes, you need to know it and how you can use it, but to be honest, it's not the most exciting class. So when the students come in and say, okay, we're going to talk about door control today, and I want you to tie a girth hitch on that door. You tie the girth hitch, you can come take your seat. So now you just got them engaged. You know, you broke the ice, and they're learning something really important like door control. In reality, they just came there for the stack effect class.
Very good. All right. Finally, Mark Van Feist.
Well, we want to thank you all for, again, tuning in to our third installment of the series of the Standpipe and Standpipe High-Rise Challenges. And I hope for those who are listening and tuning in, you've learned a few things, hopefully, from our discussion that you may be able to use for yourself as a benefit. And as I mentioned before, you can reach out to any one of us. We're more than willing and more than glad to share and to assist in any way we possibly can with your dilemma in terms of what you're facing with making small changes or a big change in your equipment, your operations, tactics, whatever it might be. We're here to help. So please, by all means, reach out and use us as a resource to help you with this endeavor. I guess with our talk tonight, I guess what I could summarize and take away as a takeaway point for those listening is, for one, we need to practice as we play. And so that's going to take some ingenuity and some creativity on your part, if you're the training officer or the instructor in charge of doing this, to think of how we can do this, to make this particular topic come to life and how we can make it realistic for the individuals that are taking part so we can develop their muscle memory. And so it's not just simply a matter of saying you're tasked with doing the standpipe kit for us today for an hour session and just rhyming it off without preparation. Use some preparation, use some ingenuity, think how can I make this relevant and realistic that's going to aid in muscle memory development. And second of all, I guess I'm going to plead to the white shirts of our departments in our industry. Please equip us with what we need to do the high-rise job and standpipe operations. Arm us, give us the place to practice, give us access so we can be well prepared. We can be a well-oiled machine like a professional football team or professional hockey team to win that cup, to win the Super Bowl of the NFL. Make us like that. And if you do that for us, we as a service individuals, the grunt workers, we will be better. And if we're better, that risk we discussed that we're going to face, the high risk, low frequency events, we'll be better prepared for it. And in the long run, you'll prevent the domino effect of individuals possibly getting injured and or getting killed when we're facing this foe at any time. So those are my two takeaways. And lastly, don't forget, my friends, May 2021 will be our Canadian High Rise Conference, the second one. So we'll be advertising that very soon. The new dates, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's May 13th to the 15th, I think. Don't quote me, but I think that's the actual date range for 2021. But we're going to have, again, access to the Hilton Hotel, where we'll have a lot of skills going on at one time, with us actually stretching 2.5-inch hand lines, doing fly standpipes, hose loads, hose advancements, FDC connections. We're gonna have all that stuff going on, hands-on, real reality in terms of the actual playground, with some top-notch instructors like Bill Guston and the guys from Miami-Dade, Clark Lamping, Jonesy from Cobb County, as well as Kyle Smith, Dennis Laguerre, as well as the other guys you see here tonight, Steve Macris, Rob Wiggins, Mike Langford, those guys, Brent Brooks, John Evans, all those guys will be there to lend and to teach and to help you as a learner be better in the long run. So don't forget to come out to the CHC for 2021.
Thanks, Mark. And thank you very much to the panelists. Thanks for the people that were listening in. If you have any questions whatsoever, give us a text, email, or even call. Some of you have my number. And let's just keep on training. All right. I appreciate everybody's assistance and input. This is the third and final, but there's nothing to say we'll have more coming up on other topics. So thank you. We're going to sign off now. Thanks, guys.